No need to wait.
Yeah. All right. Well, then we'll just get started. Yeah, you may have noticed our title is. That's right. Well, you can introduce yourself. All right. Yes. We're us. Two things have changed in the program. One is we have our co-author Pamir Gogoy on our paper here, and also slightly changed the title. Okay. Just not going to read this, but we're thanking out both our sponsors from National Science Foundation and the National Endowment for Humanities, and of course our Mundari speakers who helped make this possible, and Bikram Jora, a colleague from Woodley Guns, who did a lot of the recordings in the field, as well as four of our graduate student interns who helped with the annotation. Okay, so this is where the Mundari language is in Eastern India. Basically, you can see it's a little diffuse. It's the number 4 in here. What we're going to go over is the fact that the data that's appeared in print on this language has been rather confused and confusing with regards to prominence. Moreover, a lot of work that we've done recently on traditional acoustic cues suggests that those aren't particularly robust systems that reveal much in this domain. And so we're turning now to two other elements in the segmental domain, that is realizations of vowels and consonants, to see if that helps understand where the prominence is falling in this language. Okay, so just briefly about Mundari. It's a large language spoken in Eastern India. It has about 2 million speakers. There are 2 different ethnic groups in the reckoning of Indian records that are the same people, one called Munda, one called Mundari, but they speak the same language. There are 4 dialects traditionally reckoned, although this may not be true linguistically. There are some features of these 4 that could be described as dialectal, but there are also other languages which have separate sociolinguistic identity, like Ho and Gomij, Asuri, Turi, Koda, which probably are linguistically dialects of Mundari as well. So just to cover briefly past views on it, we'll start with Hoffman, who was a missionary who worked for 50 years amongst the Mundari and spoke the language quite well. He said that in disyllabic words, accent is on the first syllable, i.e. a trochaic system, though he didn't determine or detail what it was that cued this, or he defined stress, as he called it, or accent in this, and then said that the accented syllable has hardly more stress than the non-accentuated syllable. So it's not super revealing. The next scholar that we'll look at is Walter Cook. He said that it's the disyllabic words are stressed if it's the final syllable is closed. Otherwise, it's the initial syllable. So this is a quantity-sensitive trochaic system. This is also, incidentally, the source that was used in Shearing and Vanderhulst in their survey. Sinha, 1975, was a totally different approach. He says that we have stress on the second syllable if the first syllable is open, and only on the first syllable if it's closed, i.e. a quantity-sensitive iambic system. Osada is the most recent scholar to have worked on this language prior to us, and he had a kind of similar analysis to Sinha, but one of his things that is differing is that CVC, CV words, if that was a homoorganic stop, nasal plus stop cluster, then that functioned as a single unit as if it was CVCV, so those would then have stress on the second syllable, not the first syllable. He also made a couple of other claims that the stress only can fall on the second or third syllable in trisyllabic words, but only on the third syllable if it's not a suffix. That makes any sense. So it's a lexical item that's non-suffixed. And also that 4-syllable words, regardless of their structure, whether lexical or grammatical, always resolve into 2 2-syllable phonological words. And thus the syllable never stressed, first syllable is never stressed, regardless of weight. We'll also mention briefly here a historical analysis of Mundari, which is referencing Donegan and Stan. They claimed that Proto-Munda underwent a shift to trochaic structure, and that all Munda languages were trochaic. But as Luke has demonstrated in work, both starting his dissertation and various papers that we've done together since then, that Sora is very clearly a second syllable prominent language. That's one language within the Munda family that's clearly not trochaic. Also, Assam Santali, our work on Assam Santali has revealed that that language clearly has second syllable prominence as well. And this echoes and supports with instrumental analysis and statistics claims, impressionistic claims made by Ghosh 2008 about the Santali of West Bengal. So what this means is that not every Munda language shows evidence for trochaic structure, but some have remained iambic. But it also doesn't mean that no Munda languages show trochaic structure either. Okay, and just as a notice that acoustic cues are inconsistent. It should be yes, nor are they consistent. So it's maybe a little confusing. So they're inconsistent. The acoustic cues. So what cues prominence varies across the Munda languages. All right.
So having this problem in the literature, we started investigating the Mundari language to see how prominence system works in this language. And we just started with some disyllables and monosyllables. And we curated a data set of 400 disyllables, 200 monosyllables. The monosyllables were mostly bimoraic, and the disyllables had different kinds of syllable structure combinations, open and closed mixed. And we recorded 10 native Mundari speakers in Jharkhand in the Khunti district. And the speakers were bilingual in Hindi, and they were also a mixture of literate and semi-literate. So we had all kinds of population, and of course, male and female speakers were recorded. We tried to do the recordings in a noise-free environment, but there were sometimes problems, and we tried to work around whatever the environment was there. And we used a steady-state recorder and a headphone microphone, which was unidirectional. So we tried to get good quality recording as much as we can. And all the prompts that we curated, we gave to the speakers in Hindi, and they responded back in their native language, which is Mundari. And we also tried to control the intonational realizations of those utterances. So every utterance was recorded once in isolation in three different contexts. First was the phrasal context. The remaining two were sentential, where there was one sentence without focus on the target utterance and another sentence with focus on the target utterance. So we tried to control the intonational environment of those utterances as well. So there's a picture from the field recording, and then the annotations that we were doing with our junior scholars and various interns. For acoustic measurements, we try to see the classic measurements for identifying prominence patterns, which is duration, intensity, and frequency. And for each of the three measurements, we measured them across the two syllables and the disyllables. And for durations, we looked at the entire length of the vowel nucleus in both syllables. Intensity, we looked at the average acoustic energy in the two syllables. And fundamental frequency, we mainly looked at the average. So we didn't look into the velocity or other parameters that people have used. We just stayed to the average F0. And we, of course, normalized for speaker variability using the G-score normalization method. And for looking into the segmental realization based on different syllable positions, we are looking at consonants for onset duration, which is the entire length of the onset. And for looking at the onset duration, we are looking at words that were uttered only in the phrasal and sentence context. We didn't take the words from isolation for looking into the onset duration, because in case of stops, we really don't know when the stop closure happens. And for vowels, we looked into both F1 and F2, and we are looking into the vowels in relation to the overall vowel acoustic space and not just the vowel heights. And we try to look at the perceptual distance between the vowels as well, using the Euclidean distance, which is a cue for knowing how the vowels are perceptually distinct from each other. And then we are also looking to the overall vowel acoustic space based on the syllable positions of the vowels. So now moving into the results, this is what we see when we look into the duration analysis. We clearly see that the duration in isolation shows longer duration in the second syllable, but this is not the case when we have the words in phrasal, non-focal, and focal environments. This means that duration is a utterance level cue and not a prosodic cue for identifying words. We also wanted to see if the syllable weight has any effect on the duration cue. As you can see that in case of isolation, there isn't any correlation between the syllable weight and the duration. The duration of the final syllable is always longer, irrespective of the syllable weight. Whereas in case of words that we're producing that are non-isolation context, we see that there may be a time when the duration is even neutralized, and the reverse is seen in the other syllable structures, but not really showing any specific pattern with relation to the syllable weight and in relation to syllable weight and vowel duration. Then with vowel intensity, we see that there is more intensity on the second syllable, and this is consistent in isolation as well as in the different content utterances. In relation to different syllable structures, we again a mixture of realizations. It's not very consistent. There are times when the first syllable may be more intense and the second syllable may be less intense, but this is not very consistent with the syllable weight per se. Fundamental frequency. It looks like fundamental frequency difference is there between first and second syllable, and second syllable may have more fundamental frequency, average fundamental frequency. But this difference is kind of exaggerated in the phrasal and sentenceal environments, but not so much in the isolation. This means that the phrasal and sentenceal pitch overrides the word like pitch. And with relation to different syllable structures, again, we don't see any consistent patterns because only these two show that the first syllable may have a bit higher fundamental frequency, which both have a heavy syllable, but it's not the case for the example here in the middle. So yeah, for the three classic cues, we see that there is a variation and there isn't any consistent cueing of prominence based on the three classic cues. So we started looking into other cues, like how do the consonants realize and how do the vowels realize those different syllable positions. So with regard to consonants, here is an example for a disyllabic word in a sentential frame. You can see that the consonant duration is longer in the first onset than in the second onset, and they are both voiced consonants. Broadly speaking, what we saw is that onset duration can be broadly divided into consonants that are voiced and consonants that are voiceless. So voiced consonants generally show longer onset duration in the first onset, and this is true for nasals as well as liquids, whereas voiceless consonants show longer onset duration on the second syllable. This is true for voiceless stops as well as fricatives. Fricatives are only voiceless in the language, contrastive voiced fricatives don't occur in the language. So when we look into the onset durations and for all of these consonantal categories, we see that they can be of two types, voiced and voiceless. So voiced onsets are longer in first syllable, whereas voiceless onsets are longer in the second syllable. So that's why we can just broadly categorize them as voiced and voiceless and not go into the details of each feature. With regard to the relation in heavy and light syllables, we do see some pattern here, and we see that in first heavy syllable there is longer onset duration, and whereas in light second syllable, there is shorter onset duration. And then when there is the first light syllable, there is never like long onset duration in this as well as in this. Here is an example where we can see the word with voiceless stop in the first onset, which is longer, whereas a voiceless stop in the second onset, shorter. So this is viewing that there may be some consonantal strengthening in the first onset position of disyllabic words. Moving into vowels, we try to see the overall acoustic space and vowel articulation in the system. So what we see that the contrastive nature of the vowel system is maintained in both the syllables. In both syllables, they are like equally contrastive, and the kind of overlap between the high and the mid vowel is seen in both syllables. But we do see another one interesting thing is that the vowels, the mid vowels especially, are a bit lower in the second syllable and a bit higher raised in the first syllable. And this becomes more clear when we look into the vowel system in monosyllabic words. So in the monosyllabic words, if we postulate that the vowel system is more canonical in the monosyllabic words, then the monosyllable vowel system is very much similar to the vowel system in the first syllable. And in the second syllable, it looks like there is a departure from the canonical form. And I would like to argue here is that since in the first syllable there is a longer vowel duration, the contrastive nature of the vowel is easy to maintain, whereas in the second syllable there is a less duration. They try to disperse more from the vowels that are like merging otherwise. So in order to look at the dispersion and the distance between the high and the mid vowel, I looked into the Euclidean distance measurements. And here we can see that the Euclidean distance between the high and the mid vowel is more in the second syllable, meaning that we are trying to maintain more perceptual distance, whereas in the first syllable, the Euclidean distance is less between the high and the mid vowel. This is true for both front mid vowel as well as for back mid vowel, back high and back mid vowel. And the reverse is also seen. The perceptual distance between low and mid vowel is increased in the first syllable, but less in the second syllable. So we do see that the vowels are readjusted depending on their syllable position, so that they try to maintain enough perceptual contrast between them. Then the last thing is to see the overall vowel acoustic space of the vowel system. We try to look at the vowel area space, and what we find is that the vowel area space is highest or like the biggest in the first syllable, and the vowel area space in monosyllable is somewhere in the middle, and the vowel area space in the second syllable is the smallest. So this again indicates that there is some kind of departure from the canonical form in first and second syllable, where first syllable the contrast is being increased, and the second syllable the contrast is like getting reduced. So at this point, I'll tell Greg to conclude our talk.
Okay, so where does this leave us? So overall, we saw that the sort of canonical acoustic cues of duration, intensity, and fundamental frequency were mixed in what they dictated. But we see that vowels that are more canonical in the space clearer in first syllables over second ones, and moreover that consonant duration and onsets are also longer in first syllables over second, and specifically heavy syllables over light syllables. So we do see a quantity sensitive system emerging with those factors under consideration. So tentatively, the answer to the question in our title is yes. They can help you prominence. So right now, what are we doing? We're testing these other claims made by Osada with 3-syllable words. Do they really function in the way that he said? And specifically, we have inflected and non-inflected forms. So we're testing the suffixal hypothesis empirically as well. And also we have 4-syllable words of both uninflected and inflected. Therefore, we're trying to test those 3 hypotheses that he put forward in his work. And just summarizing that the mid vowels in general show lowering and some centralization in second syllables versus the first syllables. And in turn, the first syllable is where we see the more canonical vowel space, and something more similar to what we find in monosyllables, which maybe that's erroneous, but that's what we're assuming is the sort of default pattern. But we still need to test the role of quantity sensitivity with the vowel realizations. And also, specifically, we haven't looked in detail yet at the vowel quality and consonant duration phenomena that we saw with the disyllables in the tri and tetrasyllabic forms. And lastly, just wanted to note that while we're seeing some initial onset strengthening, coda strengthening at the other end isn't really very easy to do, or probably not going to yield much in terms of Mundari, because we see a lot of glottalization, some of that devolving into creaky voice or vowel length. So the end of the syllables is quite unstable in Mundari. So it's really at the beginning, the onset, that we're seeing the consonantal phenomenon manifest. So thank you very much for listening.